I'm just gonna do this video. Oops, no, I've got no sound. Oh, here we go. See, I still can't get it right, can I? How are you all? Yes, this is a pre-recorded video. I hope you're doing all well. It is 9:12 in the morning, and I thought I'd just have a bit of a chat with you about some stuff. I'm sorry that I'm not live, but other people are live, and I don't like making people choose who to watch. So I thought I'd do this as a pre-record. What I want to show you is, let me find this. Oh, no, share screen. So this is just being straight recorded to YouTube. So this is like doing a live, but I'm talking to myself. So it's just been revealed today. So MH17, they've convicted 3 people for the attack on the MH17. So if you remember that in 2014, there was a plane that came straight out of the sky. 298 people, including 838 Australians, were killed when the Malaysian Airlines Boeing 777 was struck as it travelled over eastern Ukraine bound for KL. So 2 Russians and a Ukrainian have been convicted of murder. And 1 Russian has been acquitted. So the offenders, who remain at large, were tried in absentia as Moscow refused to hand them over. So they've been convicted, but they've not. Russia hasn't handed them over. I mean, if Russia wants to show some, Russia could hand them over, and it'd be really, really happy. It would be really, really helpful to hand them over so that justice could be done. But anyway, they were tried. It means they are unlikely to serve the life sentences handed down by the court, nor pay the 16 million euros in compensation they were ordered to pay outside the courtroom. The families of the Australians welcomed. The actions we've come to learn about, the missile that downed the plane, is true, he said. A court at a high level confirmed that this is what happened, and those people were deliberately murdered by those 3 defendants. It is not lost on us that the 3 were found guilty and are unlikely to see time behind bars, but we've known that since the beginning. So, Penny Wong says, who is the Foreign Minister of Australia, she's called on Russia to surrender those convicted so that they may face justice. So, the delivery of the verdicts is an important step. It delivers the famous answers they have sought. It delivers confirmation that the Russian Federation have responsibility, she said. Separatists had the direction from Russia. Russia supplied weapons, training, money, and the missile which downed the plane. She praised the investigators and her Dutch counterpart for their work in bringing the sentence. And they've been named as well. Igor Girkin, Sergei Dubinsky, and Leonid Karenchko downed the plane, and they've now sentenced for life. So as part of the panel of judges, after some consideration, but whoever pulled the trigger mistook it for a Ukrainian military aircraft. Everything indicates that the missile launched deliberately, but they believed it was a military aircraft rather than a civil one, the presiding judge said. Such an error does not detract from the premeditated intent. None of the men accused of pressing the launch button, but prosecutors say that they helped get the missile launcher into Ukraine from Russia. The most senior Russian defendant was Igor Girkin, a former colonel in Russia's Federal Security Service, who was commanding armed forces in the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic at the time of the attack. So these are the people who are convicted. So 3 of the 4 were convicted. So one of them, uh, so the third Russian charged over the attack was this guy here, a former officer in Russia's military intelligence organization, known as the GRU. He had legal representation at the trial and insisted he was innocent, and the judges ruled he'd not actively involved in the missile launch deployment and did not bear any responsibility. So these are the 3 found guilty, but it looks like he's the only one that had legal representation. So if you remember, the flight took off from Amsterdam on July the 7th, 2014, and tracked across eastern Ukraine on its way to KL, Kuala Lumpur. The Russian-backed rebels were fighting Ukrainian forces in the area at the time, so the airspace was closed to low-level aircraft. However, the MH17 was found at 33,000 feet, so it was allowed to proceed along the commonly used route. At 1:20, it disappeared from radar, and the pieces of the wreckage soon came crashing down across eastern Ukraine. The debris spread something like 50 square kilometres, so investigators had to painstakingly piece the fuselage together, get a picture of what happened. By analysing the damage to the aircraft's body and the distinctive shrapnel found in the bodies of the flight crew, investigators determined the aircraft was destroyed by a BUK missile. The court found there was ample evidence to support that conclusion. The court does not see any possibility for reasonable doubt whatsoever, the presiding judge said. Members of the Australian Federal Police were involved in a joint international investigation. Outside court, AFP Assistant Commissioner Peter Crozier said it was a painstaking process. This remains one of the most complex investigations of the Australian Federal Police has been involved in, he said. The fact that it occurred in a conflict zone made it more complex. The delivery of these verdicts is an important milestone to our collective efforts. The Australian and Dutch governments both hold Australia legally responsible for the downing of the airplanes. Since 2014, then Prime Minister Tony Abbott vowed to shirt front Russian President Vladimir Putin over the issue. That's right, I remember that when he said he'd shirt fronting. Since then, the Australian and the Netherlands have taken legal action against Russia in the International Civil Aviation Organization, seeking compensation and apology. However, Moscow denies wrongdoing and dismissed the findings of the investigators. John O'Brien said his son would still be alive had Russia not been fueling the conflict in eastern Ukraine. The court certainly highlighted the role of the Russian Federation in arming and instigating the entire conflict. It remains a source of grief and remains a source of anger for families that Russia, still to this time, has not accepted any responsibility for what they've done. Paul Gard, whose parents Roger and Jill died in the crash, said Putin shared a lot to blame. It's quite clear that Russia was heavily involved right from the start of this conflict in 2014. And the evidence in the trial has shown that the missile launcher came from Russia. So clearly, a lot of the blame has to be put on the foot of Russia. He said he did not hate those responsible. Hate is not a useful emotion, but we need to find a way to solve this conflict. Unfortunately, we've got some people in Russia, especially the leader, who is not seeing sense at how pointless this whole war is. So, as I said, unfortunately, Russia won't hand over the people responsible. So, although now the families have closure in the way that they know how it's happened, possibly why it happened, the people that were responsible are not going to face any type of repercussions. However, as I said, Russia could hand them over as a sign of goodwill, and it could be all sorted out. But anyway, it is. That's one of the things. The other thing is that Australia's been condemned by the UN just this recently. I mean, look, it's all not, there's a problem at the moment with So Four Corners, which is a current affairs program on the Australian Broadcast Corporation ABC, has had a look into youth detention, particularly over our First Nations people, or Indigenous incarceration and Aboriginal death in custody. This week, Four Corners revealed allegations about the abuse inside a West Australian youth detention centre, and the United Nations has been grilling Australia over its treatment of people in detention. The UN Committee Against Torture holds regular hearings to assess whether countries are meeting their obligations under the Convention Against Torture. This is Australia's 6th review. However, this hearing came following the UN Australia of breaching its human rights obligations after UN inspectors cancelled a tour of detention facilities due to a lack of cooperation. The government also faced tough questions on youth and immigration detention, Indigenous incarceration, and Aboriginal death in custody. And the committee also criticised the continued use of some restraint practices like spit hoods. We want to know how this issue is being handled, the committee's members said. Using spit hoods can amount to ill treatment, and they've been fostering a worsening of a person's physical health and even death. Latoya knows the devastating consequences of spit hoods. Their brother, Wayne Fella Morrison, Wiradjuri, I'm sorry for pronouncing that wrong, Kugatha and Wingagu Man died in 2016. I apologise for messing up that. Please forgive me. After being restrained at the wrists and ankles, placed in a spit hood and carried face down, chest down into a prison transport van. His inquest into his death is still pending. This reading this horrifies me because I go, this is Australia. This is not right. This is disgusting. South Australia has since criminalised the use of spit hoods, but other states and territories are yet to follow suit. That's why Latoya Rule has been campaigning for a national ban on spit hoods. Spit hoods have been recognised as a Guantanamo Bay type invention, and the place is the pinnacle of torture, they said. Doing away spit hoods is actually about human rights. This absolutely disgusts me. This is really embarrassing for me. The Latoya Rule is one of the dozens of advocates and human rights groups that have been made submissions to the UN Committee Against Torture ahead of this week's hearings. Among them was the Australian Human Rights Commission. Commissioner Lorraine Finley gave a private briefing to the committee before the public hearings, focusing on mandatory immigration detention, offshore processing, and systemic issues in the criminal justice system. That included the overrepresentation of First Nations people in detention and some really serious issues with youth detention centres, she said. Commissioner Finlay said that while there was much Australia could be proud of with respect to its human rights record, it needed to make significant progress in certain areas. It's very easy to look at other countries whose records are worse than Australia's, she said. But at the end of the day, we don't want the standard we're setting simply to be that we're not the worst in the world. The Commissioner raised alarm about the lengthy periods asylum seekers spent in detention, which she said made Australia an outliner. She also expressed concerns that some of the key recommendations of the Northern Territory Royal Commission into Youth Detention had not been implemented. We know what the problems are, but we haven't taken steps to actually fix them, she said. The UN Committee Against Torture's line of questioning revealed a level of alarm over some of the issues. If you want to talk about the overrepresentation of Aboriginal people in detention, it is really horrific, Ms. Pugh said. She pointed out it is an issue that has been raised for decades and it's not yet been solved. She also wasn't satisfied with the Australian government's response to the committee's questions about stopping the use of solitary confinement and restraints on children in youth detention. Reading reports by both national and international institutions, judges and inspectors, we are seeing situations that are not so rosy. Another UN committee member, Erin Condren, said Australia's approach to immigration detention raised significant concern for the committee, particularly because of the lack Okay, particularly of the Act, I've just lost it, of transparency in the system. The committee noted the severe and detrimental impact of immigration detention on the health and psychological health of asylum seekers who are already victims of torture. He said he also asked Australia when it would end the mandatory detention of children asylum seekers and use it as a last resort for adults. So what now? Australia is racing against the clock to make sure it meets its international human rights obligations. On the conventions against torture, and the other is the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. Under OPCAT, Australia needs to ensure that the UN Subcommittee on Prevention of Torture can make unannounced visits to places of detention. That's why Australia made international headlines last month when the SPT had to suspend its tour of Australian facilities after New South Wales and Queensland stopped the delegation from having full rights to their prisons. Seriously, New South Wales and Queensland, wake up. You need to be transparent. You know, there's the old saying, if you've got nothing to hide, you know, why wouldn't you open yourself up? There's obviously issues. Wake up, New South Wales and Queensland. Head of the SPT delegation, Alicia Mohammed, said it was not a decision taken lightly. I have to say this is only the fourth time in the 15 years of existence of the SPT that the visit has been suspended. The only other countries that failed to provide full access to UN inspectors were, I cannot pronounce it, Rwanda and Ukraine. And now Australia has to guarantee states and territories can offer unfettered access to ensure that SPT can resume. Azerbaijan, Rwanda, and Ukraine. They're not countries that I'd want to be listed next to, by the way. Australia's under other obligations under OPAC is establishing what's called national preventive mechanisms in each state and territory to oversee prisoners and detention centres. However, the delays to getting up and running in most states and territories and the January 2023 deadline is fast approaching. Australia's had 5 years to establish their NPMs. So having had 5 years of not being able to establish the NPM speaks for itself. However, in the government's defence, a previous government was in charge and this was not their priority. The Australian delegation repeatedly assured the committee it was working with New South Wales and Queensland to ensure the SPT gained access to state prisons on its next visit. We actively supported the visit and we were keen to see it resumed, the head of delegation Simon Newman said. He also told the committee that the government was working hard to establish the NPMs by its deadline. Australia is committed to its implementation of OPCAT, Mr. Newman said. Mr. Newman told the body that every Aboriginal death in custody was considered. We have a disproportionate incarceration rate for First Nation adults and youth, so reducing Indigenous incarceration rates provides the best means of reducing deaths in custody, he said. Mr. Newman pointed out that each state makes its own laws on the use of restraints and spit hoods in detention, but there are overall limitations on how they can be used. He said the Attorney General was deeply concerned by recent reports about conditions in juvenile detention and was considering what role the Commonwealth could play in addressing the issue. The committee is expected to publish a report into its review of Australia in the coming weeks. I am very concerned by that report. Doesn't look like it's going to be a very good report doesn't look like it's going to be a report to be proud of, embarrassingly, and I'm really embarrassed by that. We have a long way to go, and you know the old thing is, while you're pointing the finger at other people, you got 5 fingers pointing back at you. So anyway, look, that's just some things that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, they're yucky subjects, but we need to speak about them and talk about them. Anyway, I want to thank you for watching. On a happier note, as I said, I've got my brother's wedding today. we joke that he's becoming the Brady Bunch. He's got 4 and his partner's got 3. Makes 7. His his fiance's got 3, so yeah, they're getting married. It's going to be a great day. The sun's out. Looks like it's going to be a nice day. I might post a picture later of me all glammed up if you're interested. We'll see how it go. But yes, thank you for. Look, I'll see you again next time. I'm just trying to work out when I can do live streams. Daytime seems to be better for me at the moment than night times. But who knows? But thank you for watching, and look, tell me what you think in the comments below. Are you shocked by Russia? Well, I'm not shocked by Russia not handing over the people, but I'm shocked about. Oh, look, I guess the juvenile detention is one of those things that, you know, if you close your eyes, you pretend that it goes away, type thing. We've made ground. We've got a lot further to go. I know, for example, Victoria has human rights, has a charter of they have a charter of human rights. I know that there's the charter of human rights. There's also the and that's very detailed. Although the charter of human rights in Victoria, you know, it can't be held against you if you break them, but it's frowned upon, you know. But I think we've got a lot more work to do as far as human rights is concerned. We're getting better, and maybe this change of government will sort that out. Anyway, as I said, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Make sure that you hit like and subscribe for me. Thanks. Bye.